Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled "Neighbors' Guests Parked on My Property. I chained their cars together and towed them off my land." Hey everybody, I wanna tell you about my neighbor who thinks it is okay to tell his guests to park on my property. I live on a little bit of a larger area of land that is basically a farm. The other people that live near me just live in normal homes, so even though I am a farmer, none of my neighbors are. It usually works out without problems, except for one neighbor specifically that I have a constant problem with. My problem with him is actually quite simple. He is a total butthole. Most people around here show respect for their neighbors, but this guy seems to think he is the only person in the world that matters. He disrespects me and all the other neighbors he sees every chance he gets, which on its own is bad enough. The parties that he throws though are what gets really out of hand. He had at least one party a week and blasts loud music while him and his friends get drunk. He does not try to contain the party inside his home either, so in the middle of the night they are out in the streets screaming and waking everyone else on the block up with their shouting. Any farmer knows that we have to be awake at the crack of dawn to start working, not to mention other neighbors that have jobs and cannot live with being kept up half the night with neighbor and his parties. But you can see from the title that this story really is not about the parties that he throws, since honestly nobody has ever done anything about them. No, instead I need to tell you about where the people who are coming to his party decide to park. And that is right on my grass, where I don't want them to be. I have tried catching them parking to tell them that they couldn't do it, to even putting up signs telling them it was private property. After being ignored in all those ways for a while, I finally went and tried to talk to neighbor about where his guests were parking. I did not mention the noise from the parties because several people already tried, so I was going to focus on my big issue with the parking. Me? Some of your guests from last night parked on my grass again. Neighbor, so? Me, so? Are you seriously acting like this is an okay thing to do? It is my property, and I'm asking you to tell them not to park there. It ruins my grass and I don't want them there. Neighbor, I told them to park there. You have all that space and they are going to be gone before you wake up in the morning. I don't see the big deal. Me, the big deal is that it is my property and I'm telling you that they are not allowed to park there. A couple of things I want to quickly address to get out of the way. The first being, yes, the cars are usually gone or mostly gone by the time I start my day, which means they are probably getting in their cars and driving off my property drunk. The fact a fence has not been broken is short of a miracle at this point. The second more obvious thing is that most people would be asking me right now why nobody has called the police or had these cars towed. That is a common thing I see in a lot of these stories, so I have to explain why that was not possible. I live in a small area of a small country, and to keep things short, the police are useless. I don't mean that they wouldn't help, I basically mean that they wouldn't come at all, and the ones that do would usually be getting paid off by whichever side could give them money. Basically, if I called the police and they actually came, neighbor would just slip them some money and they would leave. As for towing the cars, well, there are not any tow trucks where I live. There is a couple of tow yards where towed cars can get dropped off, but they don't actually have trucks or drivers to do it. The only few tow trucks belong to the police, so I had to figure out another way I was going to deal with these people. I was in luck though, because what neighbor didn't know was that the guy who ran the local tow yard was actually my cousin. I went over and talked to him and he mentioned that some farmers, since they have the equipment, can bring the cars to the tow yard themselves, and once it is there, they have to pay a fine to get it out. This gave me a wonderful idea, but first I wanted to give the guests one final chance. Don't ask me why, I just have a big heart and like giving people the benefit of the doubt right up until the last minute. My next step was that I got a big sign to place on my property, and on it had written that there was no parking or the cars would be towed away. I placed it right where the guests tended to park, and then I waited for neighbor to throw his next party. Of course, it did not take long, and because of the noisy music, basically telling me right away I didn't even need to keep my eyes out. After a couple of hours, I went out and saw 3 cars parked not only on my property, but right in front of the sign. I went to get some chains and hook all 3 cars up together before getting the truck I use for farming. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact word in English, and using it to tow all 3 cars down the block where my cousin was expecting me. All 3 got put into the tow yard, and now the only thing that was left to do was wait for them to find out their cars were gone and freak out. Of course, that moment came when they were bashing on my front door with neighbor all drunk and screaming about the missing cars. I told them that the sign said they would get towed and told them where their cars were taken to. Then I promptly slammed the door right in their faces. I know that the whole revenge should have been the most satisfying part, but let me tell you, slamming the door in the face of a bunch of drunk jerks is a special kind of good feeling. This is where the story might end for some, but there is a little bit more of an ending. My cousin told me that a few days later the guys came to get their cars and each had to pay the large fine to get them back. They apparently cursed him out, which is sadly something he is used to in his line of work, and threatened to call the police. The only good news is that while the police can be bribed to a degree, everything I did was totally legal, so me and my cousin are safe. I guess the word got around about the parking because it became less of a problem after that. It has only been a few months and I've only had 1 or 2 stray cars parked on my property that I knew of. With both of those, I pointed out the sign and warned them what would happen, and then they moved. I know it is not the best ending in the world because my neighbor is still a butthole who throws loud parties at night, but now that I have my property back to myself, I feel like it is good enough until someone finds a solution to the rest of his problems. And yeah, ripe stars, I would say that is simply a step in the right direction, and it shows the neighbor that he cannot just do as he pleases because there will be consequences. But obviously, one single event will not change the character of such an entitled neighbor. However, ripe stars, I'm really curious, have you ever had to deal with any sort of entitled neighbors? If you did, please feel free to share your story either in the comments or on r/ripe stories on Reddit, which is our own subreddit where you can post your own stories and I might read them in a video. Thank you so much. And the next one is titled, HOA forced me to take down my Navy husband's welcome home sign and threatened me with fines. I know that the HOA can piss off a lot of different types of families. I think mine learned a big lesson that when you mess with a military family, you are going to get destroyed. Now, that might sound a little bit harsh, but let me take you back a little to explain exactly what is going on and why I got so angry. My husband is in the Navy and he has been deployed for the last 3 years. I missed him so much and so did our 2 children, so when we heard that he was going to be coming back home in a month, we were extremely excited. We decided that we needed to make him a big sign and put it up in front of our house. Me and the kids all worked to make a welcome home sign for him. Now, I will be the first to admit that with an 8 and 5-year-old helping with the decorating, it was not some magnificent piece of art. However, it was not supposed to be. It was just a personal message from his family of him coming back home. The area we lived had a lot of military families actually, so it was not uncommon to see people coming home and a family getting excited. The only problem was that I already knew from the start that the HOA in my neighborhood was a total pain in the butt to everybody. Just to give a quick example, a bunch of the families being military wanted to show support by flying a flag in their yard. The HOA though came up with some total BS rule about having flags in yards and made them take it down. Eventually it got resolved where a smaller flag was allowed, but it was still a kick in the gut to all of us. Anyway, I looked through their stupid little rules and found out that there was only one rule about having banners and signs in your yard, and that was a size limit. Honestly, I did not agree with the rule, but our sign was below that limit, so there shouldn't have been any problems. I would have had the sign be twice the size though, just to show that I was proud of my husband if it was up to me and I was not living in this stupid HOA neighborhood. Even though we had a month before him coming home, we put up the sign so every day we could look at it and remind ourselves that he was coming home. The kids were so happy and telling all of their friends how their daddy was coming home and that he was in the Navy. I tried to explain to them the best I could without going into the detail of war and other things that are not great to tell kids. So they were basically telling the other kids that their daddy worked as a superhero for the country, keeping it safe. On the sign they even tried to draw him with a little cape. Anyway, after about 2 weeks, the HOA sent me a letter in the mail. Now, this was not just a stuck in my mailbox kind of letter, it was hand-delivered and from their lawyer. They claimed my sign was against their bylaws because it was only allowed to be up for a week maximum. This was not anywhere in the rules and they were threatening to fine me for every day that it was up. If I had to guess, they probably thought the hand-done sign was ugly or something. I don't really care what their reasoning was. All I know is that they got a military wife angry, and one thing you should know about us is that military spouses are not alone. It also turns out that I was not the only military family in the neighborhood that they pissed off that week. Someone had given their life fighting overseas, so the families had put ribbons on their lawn to remember him by. It was the son of this older couple and he was their only child. Everyone felt horrible for them and could not believe when we found out the HOA was threatening them to take down the ribbons or face serious fines. Now, with 2 families under attack by them and a neighborhood that is full of active military and veterans, you can expect that things did not go well for them. We decided to have an entire full-stage rebellion and it was going to start with our lawns. Flags went up along with more welcome home signs for my husband, thank you for your service signs for the veterans, and of course ribbons for the fallen loved ones. The HOA did not know what to do at that point because nobody was going to pay their fines and they did not have the money to sue every single person in the neighborhood. A meeting was called and we showed up in force with no intention to try and even talk to them after what they pulled. They even started out trying to defend themselves while we were telling them they had to step down or face even more anarchy. Now, we were not going to do anything crazy, just basically ignore their stupid rules and do whatever we wanted with our own property. They basically were not given a choice in the end besides stepping down and letting a new group of people take control of the HOA. When that happened, all of the fines were taken away and now the HOA actually had representation for the fact that about 85% of us were in some way military families. Before, none of the HOA had connections and that might have been why this was such a problem. My kids were actually so happy when the entire neighborhood was decorated with flags because in their minds the entire thing was for their dads coming home. It was honestly so cute and I could not wait to tell my husband. The funny part was that those original HOA members were still trying to defend that my sign could not have been up for that long. Just because of that though, I think that I might just keep it up for as long as I want to know. I was going to take it down after he got back, but since it bugs those people so much, it would be a shame to do it. Or I might make another sign with my kids about their dad being in the Navy. For anyone that is wondering when he came home, we were all so happy to see him and he absolutely loved the sign that we made for him. He also loved that the neighborhood had changed and now really felt like a place where military families were welcome. All in all, it ended well and the moral of the story is a simple one. Don't mess with the families of those in the military because we won't take it lying down. We are a group that sticks together and does not let anyone push us around so they can just control things. And Ripe Stars, if you have watched until here, I would really appreciate it if you could also like the video if you enjoy my content because that would help me tremendously. At the moment, I gotta be honest, the YouTube algorithm is kind of weird again, so a like would really help me out a lot. Thank you so much in advance. And the next one is titled, I just did what I was told to do. A decade ago, I was an administrator for a hospital. one of 2 admins, a couple of techs, and a few application support people and a couple of programmers. Our boss, the IT director, let's call him Fred, had a temper. Whenever something happened, if we didn't go directly to him for guidance, then he would get angry. Now, most of the team he never yelled at or got mad at because he didn't know enough of IT to understand their jobs. For some reason though, probably due to my demeanor at the time, not anymore thanks to him, I just took it and did what was asked and what was needed. He would take his anger out on me. It was so bad that the team often referred to me as the sponge, able to take Fred's red-faced yelling, and after he vented he was fine for a few days until something else set him off. The catalyst. One morning, our primary outward-facing web server died. This was not unexpected, as I had been telling Fred that it was old and needed a refresh, but he called me an alarmist and said as long as we had a system backup, that we did, that it was not an issue. I mentioned if hardware died we would have to have the hardware handy, but it fell on deaf ears. Well, when it died, I got an alarm about it and I was in the data center trying to get it back up and running when Fred comes in and tells me to get it working right away. I tell him I'm already on it, but it is looking like the RAID controller is hosed. That I doubt I could get it up soon and that I would need to harvest parts from DCOM servers to build one if he wanted it today and to order a new server immediately, that the specs were in his email from me. He tells me that I have 30 minutes to get it back up and running or I will get written up for refusing an order and for neglecting my duties. I reply that even if I could get a server built and OS loaded in that time, it was going to take more than 30 minutes to copy the data over to the new server and that I cannot change the laws of physics to suit his fancy. He replied with, "You know, I have 29 minutes," and walked off. Yeah, he wrote me up for it. I took an hour to get it operational and the data took about as long to copy, but it was up in under 3 hours total. If I didn't sign, I would be terminated immediately, so I signed it but added under duress. And now the beginning of the end. A few months later, Fred came to my desk and asked what I was doing. I told him I was going over patches that needed to be applied to various servers and hardening the ones that could not be patched for various reasons. Fred asked me who told me to do that. He had assigned me a job and he expected me to get it done. The job he had assigned was setting up a laptop in one of the conference room for a CPR refresher class that was next week. It was Wednesday and I had all day that day and 2 more days to get it done. He chose me and not a tech because, well, I never knew why honestly, even the techs were baffled, but you never argued with Fred. Anyway, I explained that I had plenty of time to get that done and would ensure before I left on Friday that it would be waiting and I would even come in early to brief the presenters. Well, that was not good enough. Fred proceeded to yell at me for 30 minutes in his office with the door closed per usual about how I was insubordinate and he paid me to do what I was told when I was told to do it, and that anything I thought that needed to be done, I was to immediately forget it existed and do only what was assigned by him. I was to be at his disposal at any time, I was on call a lot too, and that unless something was physically on fire, I was to do only what he explicitly assigned me to do. I said, okay. Q. Malicious compliance. For the next several months I did exactly as he instructed. I did not mention patches or scan for vulnerabilities. I did not even log into a server at all unless he told me I needed to do something specific. I did not even restart services or disable terminated users unless he told me to. We would get a list of terminated users each week, but unless he told me to work the list, I did nothing. The other admin did the same as well, since it would have made his job impossible if he did it all. Then one day I got asked to apply for a position with corporate. I went to the interview and they already knew who I was and basically said they wanted me. They mentioned that policy stated they had to tell Fred, and I told them that if Fred found out, he would fire me because he would not like the promotion over him. The role would have made me over his data center but not his team. They said they doubted he would do that, so I said okay. Well, sure enough, when Fred got wind of my promotion, he fired me. The worst part was, he fired me in a way that made it impossible for me to get the corporate job. They rescinded their offer, no reason given, but after speaking with a lawyer, it got changed to resigned because he would have made it impossible to work for him if I had returned. The fallout of the story: a few weeks later I had another job, better pay, and I was the IT manager. About 6 months later, they had a data breach. It was nasty and all over the news. Fred was encouraged to resign. I learned much later that someone from my old team had contacted corporate and told them what happened and why Fred fired me, and he got in really hot water. Then the data breach happened and he was going to be fired, and he knew it, so he resigned before they could fire him. I looked him up a few times after that. He tried life as a contract project manager but never finished any projects. Now he's retired. Wonder why. Edit: since there is a question as to how I got screwed out of my promotion, I will paste my reply here. I'm sorry to leave it so vague. Corporate offered me the job on a Tuesday to start in 3 weeks. Fred fired me on Thursday. By Tuesday of the following week, corporate reached out and told me that due to me being fired, they were no longer able to extend their offer. The person that called me was not the person that hired me. I told them to contact the person that hired me because he knew this would happen. They said it is not their policy to do that, and I am ineligible for a review. I even tried emailing the person that hired me, and he tried to go to bat for me, but corporate HR told him I was not eligible for rehire. That is when I went to a lawyer. The lawyer wrote some letters and was able to get them to change my status, but because corporate hired someone already for that role, I would have to take my old role. I declined for obvious reasons, and thus the resigned status. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.